Use the crude picture that you're seeing on the screen. This is my just quick and dirty attempt to fuse screen captures from the live stream together so we can get a complete picture of the Slayer skill tree. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna go through the skill tree of what I think what's going on. And of course, if you've seen my last video, the breakdown, a lot of the things that I kind of called out were more or less on point. So this makes this video a little easier. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through the skill trees. I will also have video footage that shows, to the best of the ability, if it exists, what this skill probably is going to be or what it represents. So let's start with Gunblade Focus. We're going to be paying attention really closely to these symbols. Symbols in NGS are actually very good, and they're very telling of what these skills are or what they probably will be. When we look at Gunblade Focus or Gun/Focus, depends on what server you're on, you build up gear. So once again, Gunblade is going to have a gear gauge by hitting enemies. In accordance with your gauge level, your attack power, PP recovery, and PP consumption will decrease and your PP recovery increases, excuse me. The gear gauge will reset to 0 after a certain amount of time has passed without hitting an enemy. Now that's important when we get into some of these other skills. But next we're gonna go into what we also know about, which is Gunblade Focus or Gun/Gear Overdrive. So this is an active ability. How do we know that this is an active ability? It's got a black background. One of the things we always have to remember, and you can look through other class skill trees, if it's an active ability that you can put on your sub palette, so on and so forth, it is going to have a black background. Once the gear gauge reaches its maximum stage, activating Overdrive will consume all gear, causing Gunblade gear effects to increase for a limited time. So chances are, what are the gear effects? Probably the effects you get from Gunblade Focus. Also the effects you probably get from Gunblade Focus Critical Up, Overflow. That'll be interesting, I'm not too sure. These other ones, probably not so much, given how this functions, because essentially it takes all of your focus away. Using the skill again, activate a powerful blow, which you'll see on the screen what that is. Now let's also get into Unleashed Rage, which is another active ability. Once again, be mindful of the black background compared to, look at Blade Counter, the white background, which means this is a skill that is not active. But unleash a powerful blow by consuming the gauge that fills from PAs, Photon Arts, and /Pursuit, or how I believe it will be global version, which is going to be Relentless Blade. It will consume gauge that is built by Photon Arts and Relentless Blade. That is very, very important when we understand what these other things are going to be. And then Unleash Rage after effect. So after using Unleash Rage, you are going to get an increased critical hit rate for a certain period of time. Let's get into our other skills. Ones that are probably obvious, we don't really have to go too much into, so we're just gonna knock them off. Critical Up. This is a skill that most likely increases your critical hit rate. Gallant Attack Critical Up. Similar to Critical Up, except if we look at the icon, this is going to increase your critical hit rate when fighting bosses. This is very similar to Awake Yell with Tector, where if you're in the proximity of a boss, Photon Blast accumulation increases. Critical hit PP gain. I think this one's also obvious. When you land a critical strike, you'll get some percentage or some amount of PP back based on that critical attack. We're gonna skip through these in a little bit. We're gonna focus on the Gunblade gear just because I believe these are more streamlined. So we've already talked about Gunblade Focus. We've already talked about Focus Overdrive. Now we're gonna talk about Gunblade Focus Gauge Amplifier. It's hard to see because of the image, but what we see is we see the Gunblade, and in the top right corner, we see the gear that we see on all of our Gunblade Focus skill icons, because this is a gear related ability. But you'll also, if you've got eagle eyes, will see that there are the triple arrows pointing up. Triple arrows pointing up usually mean an increase of something. In this case, it's going to be the increase in your Gunblade Focus gear gauge. So all of your attacks that build focus are going to add a little bit more accumulation. This is no different than for all of you Tector mains or Tector players who have compound technique amplify. It increases the rate in which you build your comp technique gauge. Gunblade Focus Reset PP gain. Now, for those who played Luster and PSO2, a lot of these Gunblade Focus abilities should be very familiar. What happens when you don't attack? Remember when we looked at Gunblade Focus? If you don't attack for a certain period, you lose the focus. Or in PSO2, if you were luster, you lose voltage. Focus and voltage are essentially being combined for PSO2 NGS for Slayer. If you lose focus, it resets, say, back to 0. You are going to gain some amount of PP. This is a PP recovery, which is interesting of the ways that you'll be able to use it. Chances are, if you trigger overdrive, you're going to, of course, burn or deplete your focus gauge, which probably also triggers the PP gain. Now, of course, overdrive still for a certain period of time, because once again, this is an active ability that will have a timer before it expires. All of these other abilities that get enhanced stats are still going to be active. So you use overdrive, you'll gain all your PP, you'll still have your Gunblade Focus, you'll still have your crit up. And then once you lose overdrive, or if you use that overdrive finisher, everything resets. You're back to 0. Gunblade Focus critical up. I think this is also self-explanatory. As you build focus, your critical attack rate will also increase. So of course, the higher the focus, the higher the crit rate. And then Gunblade Focus Overflow. This one is not as straightforward and could actually mean a couple of different things. What do we see? We see the gear gauge, we see Gunblade, and we also see our clock symbol in the top right corner. You should be familiar with this because we see this for things like short cycle. So if you use Hunter Physique short cycle, if you use Braver Combat short cycle, if you use Photon Flare short cycle, if you use Ranger Grenade short cycle, you're always going to see this symbol. So, Overflow, what could this mean? This could mean a couple of things. One is that when your focus depletes, or if let's say you use something that triggers its depletion, you will maintain a certain level of focus. It could also be the rate in which your gear gauge depletes slows down. So let's say that it takes 4 seconds of not attacking or not using attacks that build focus for your focus gauge to go away, to vanish, to go back to 0. This skill might say, hey, instead of 4 seconds, it's going to be 5 seconds. So it gives you some more time. Another thing that it could be, there's some cooldown related to overdrive. Now, I don't think that is the case because I feel like this skill would then be under overdrive. So I feel like it has something to do with how your focus is managed when it comes to resetting, when it comes to building an overflow that doesn't necessarily give you additional bonuses, but maybe it does. Maybe this just increases your focus rate, or at the very least, it reduces the penalty or the chances of losing focus during battle. So chances are it's one of those 3. We'll see as it comes out. Now I'm going to jump around a bit because I'm going to focus on the ones that we do probably know and have seen in the trailers. We're going to look at Slug Shot. And I want to call this out. Symbols are important. The bottom left symbol, we kind of see a sword with that diamond. That symbol is representative of photon arts. The symbol in the top right corner usually specifies things like weapon actions or directional inputs or a combination of the two. What this says is when using a Gunblade photon art, if you either use a directional input or a weapon action, and chances are this is going to be a weapon action, you will trigger Slug Shot. So in my last video, I referred to Slug Shot, what is likely quick shoot. When you're doing a photon art, you'll notice that there is a purple horizontal visual effect line during the photon art. Most likely, if you press the weapon action button, thus this symbol here, during the photon art, you're going to get Slug Shot. So chances are quick shoot, which is just the luster term, is probably Slug Shot giving this skill. Because we are dealing with photon arts, we can probably get into what Relentless Blade is. We've also seen this. I also want to call out that the placement of these skills are very important. They're very meaningful of where they're placed. When Gunblade photon arts are used, something will trigger an extra attack. Now this is the extra attack symbol. If you look at Wand EX attack, you will see this. Basically, this symbol says either do a button press or a combination and you will get an extra attack or a sequence of extra attacks. So what do I think Relentless Blade is? If we go back to the original Slayer trailer, when we see that second photon art, we see that long extended slash sequence that ends in gunshot. That is probably Relentless Blade. So probably what happens is when you're using a photon art, once again, Gunblade photon art symbol, if you hold down the photon art button, you trigger Relentless Blade. This is essentially the enhanced PA that I called out in the other trailer, but effectively that is probably Relentless Blade. We get into Relentless Blade Reinforce. Interesting. We do have technically two reinforced skills, even though I think Wand Lovers is still Line Force. But if we look at both Launcher Reinforce and Wand Reinforce, they increase attack speed and a little bit of potency. What this could be, there's a couple of things, but let's look at the symbols. Gunblade, extra attacks, and then the arrow pointing up. So it could be that Relentless Blade increases in potency, Relentless Blade increases in attack speed, or Relentless Blade has some other property, like maybe there's super armor, so where you won't get interrupted. You'll still get hit, but it won't interrupt you while doing the attack. But essentially, while you're doing that long sequence, you'll have some other benefit to this technique. But now let's look at Mobile Blade. This one's tricky. But if you look at the fighter skill tree, this is the same setup as fighter skip arts. And so essentially what this skill is, this is how you trigger or activate move stay arts. As you saw in both trailers, when you use a Slayer photon art, it has different properties based on whether or not you input a directional input or if you just press the button. It looks as if the natural state of these Slayer photon arts are the stay art version. So if you learn this skill, you will now have the move art. And why are we looking at this? It's just Gunblade and this symbol right here. Once again, this symbol kind of plays on a couple of things, but really it's either the weapon action or some type of directional input. Using fighter as a reference, this is like it's fighter skip arts, this is probably how you initiate move arts. So if you don't like move arts or you don't want them for whatever reason, you don't learn this skill. Mobile Blade counter. Now, of course, this is connected to the move arts, which it specifies that, hey, this is probably some counter ability for our move art photon arts. We didn't see this, or at least if we did, it was very quick or hidden. But if we look at our move art photon arts for Slayer, they generally either, of course, move or they have a vanish. Kind of like if you remember when you were playing Phantom, when Phantom charged the technique, you would turn into this tiny sphere. Well, if you look at Slayer's photon arts, they vanish. And I think during that vanish might be a counter window. So if you time it to where you vanish and you vanish during an enemy attack, it triggers the Mobile Blade counter or the mobile art photon art counter ability, whatever that might be, which then goes into blade counter. And now when I was looking at this, I was like, this is interesting. We have blade counter and we have mobile blade counter, and they're different because on the skill tree they're not connected. So chances are, now this is really me just theorizing. I'm not sure about this one like I am the other ones that we've covered. This one could be for our stay art Slayer photon arts. So of course, when you're not using a directional input, the one I want to call out is the stay art grenade. So if you remember in the first trailer, and technically they showed it in the second, but in the first trailer, it is very pronounced. When you throw a grenade, there is a shield visual effect that comes out. I am wondering, during these stay art photon arts, maybe all of them, or at least for the grenade, if you guard or counter an attack using that PA, you will get blade counter, which could be similar to mobile blade counter. It's just the way you activate it. And then of course, it has its own critical up ability. So that's where I'm thinking these abilities are. This activates, the mobile blade activates your move arts. And then of course you can use a move art counter if you use it during the vanish. And then for your stay arts, there's probably some windows for all or maybe that one specific photon art that allows you to counter while using those photon arts as well. This could be similar to Soaring Blade's Blade Arts parry. And now we're moving along. We've got 2 left. Now these are the ones I left for last just because other than the blade counter, this is the other 2 that I am not sure about, but our symbols help us a lot. The first symbol I want to call out is this symbol here for short range hot shot and charge blade or charge slash depending on your server in the top right. They're the same icon. you might recognize these icons because you'll see them for Fighter's twin dagger. You'll see this for Gunner's twin machine gun. You'll see this for Bouncer's jet boots. And you'll see this on Waker's harmonizer. For twin daggers, it's acceleration drive. Basically, after using the weapon action, it allows you, or some type of combination, it allows you to essentially chase your target. So if, let's say, you're 20 feet away from the target and use acceleration drive, you are now going to dash and chase that target, closing the distance. If you're using linear drive, which is the Waker, it's basically the same thing. It's a different type of combination, but this essentially means moving to the target. Let's look at Charge Blade. When charging, move to the target. This is interesting because it says when Gunblade is charging, you will do something, maybe a normal attack, or after you've done a charged ability, to activate this to then dash towards the enemy. We actually, I believe we saw this during the second trailer. When the female Slayer is shooting, I forget what enemy, but of course you'll see it on the screen. When she's shooting at the enemy, there's this big horizontal purple flash before she then zips to the enemy. That is likely Charge Blade. I believe the weapon action, as we saw in the first trailer, has charged abilities. You saw when we charged, you did the triple shot, and then charged and did the big buster. Most likely, after using one of those attacks, which requires you to hold down the weapon action, which is essentially charging it, after executing that ability, this allows you to then have that visual indicator, and if you use the right command, it's going to do Charge Blade, which dashes you to the enemy. So my thoughts is that is what this skill is, which then gets into short range hot shot. Now this one is tricky. Well, maybe not. Once again, we have the traveling or chasing the enemy symbol, but we also have arrows up. So I wonder if this is essentially when in close distance with the enemy. So you're point blank range, or you're a certain feet away, but not too far. Maybe this increases damage, or it increases some type of an effect. And once again, we want to be very cognizant that the placement of these skill trees, or these skills in the skill tree, are purposeful. So what do I mean? If this is short range hot shot, which is probably something triggered by the weapon action, where you can charge and do the triple burst or charge and do the big shot, then after using that, if you learn Charge Blade, then you can then follow up with a chase. This is very similar, the short range to rifles mechanic that it naturally has, where you have to be medium distance to where the reticle then changes to orange, letting you know that you're in the optimal distance to do damage. If you're too far away or too close, you don't get that optimized damage. The whole point of playing Rangers to stay within that space more or less. So this is probably, hey, don't be too far away and you get more damage. But of course, hey, if you are too far away, you can still use this and then close the distance. And then once you're close to the enemy, now you get this bonus. And so that is pretty much it, which is very simple really, because a lot of things are really built around the Gunblade Focus. You've got your blade counters, which I believe are very PA focused. Once again, your Slug Shot and Relentless Blade are also PA type modifiers. So it's a lot of Gunblade Photon art modifiers. When you look at these skills, either building up focus, modifying your PAs with follow-ups, or potential counters if you time them correctly. And then you've kind of got this quality of life, maintaining the range, chasing the opponent down, because as it appears, this is a very close ranged attack class. But other than that, hope this was helpful. It was actually pretty straightforward. It wasn't as hard to figure out. Of course, I could be wrong, but I feel like for the most part, this is on the money. I think, given Slayer being a very high, fast, combo-oriented class, its skills are also going to be very straightforward. The complexity comes in the execution, knowing when to use what, when, how, so on and so forth. But other than that, let me know in the comments what you think. And of course, we're 2 weeks away. And so I'll catch you all next time.